Today, I am joined with Neetu, and we are talking about women's hormonal health. Huge topic. I think it's huge for most of us, women, but
Yeah,
it's severely impacted by our modern way of life, which is why it's such a big problem. Is this something that you would agree with?
100%. Like, I think we are definitely like in a hormonal epidemic. I see it all the time. I worked in corporate for a long time. I still do as well. But I mean, with the days that I had to go into the office, just the amount of women that, while, I was a practitioner that I would speak to that were having like terrible symptoms and showing up and having to perform. And we normalize this. I think that's a part of the problem is how normalized it is, right? And that
Mm.
conversations that women might go to their primary care practitioners with, and they might be gaslit, they might be unheard, overlooked, or minimized. I think all of those things are part of the problem.
Yes, I love how you said it's normalized. How we feel, this dysregulation that we're feeling is just become something normal. But as a woman, you might be having symptoms and you know things are up. So let's go into there. And you said that you still work in corporate, but you also came from like a kind of high profile finance job, a lot of stress, fast paced life. How did this affect your own hormonal health in the way that you were living?
Yeah, and I would say I was so in it and disconnected from myself. And I think that's a state where many women just live, right? Because we just accept it. Like every month I have this excruciating, nauseating menstrual cycle, right? I'm in so much pain that I want to throw up, reliant on medication. I want to take time off work. I don't commit to social things like 2 days on my first 2 days of my cycle because I'm in so much pain. I need to just like, be curled up with a heating pad. And I think this is so many people's stories, right? And then when we talk about like the week before, right, we're getting breast tenderness, a PMS, maybe people like breakouts, of cravings, all of those things. And you just chalk it up to like, this is just how my period is. And I didn't necessarily have a wake up call until, um, yeah, I was living in London. I was in a fast paced life. I was never home. I was out all the time and drinking more and eating super processed foods and just eating in a way that was never beneficial to my period. And my periods at that time were very worse. And I'd also say, when we don't deal with like emotional stresses, like deeper emotional things in our mental health, like that also takes a big toll on our body and where these emotions reside and how they get expressed every month in our cycle. So I always find that it's an interesting connection that the week before a lot of women feel very emotional, but then we have a shedding, we have a release, right, of physically of the menstrual cycle, but then also just like of our emotions. So it's so interesting the correlation. But I didn't have a wake up call until, I was studying nutrition at this point. I was back in Canada and I had a ruptured ovarian cyst, and I have a very high tolerance for pain. But I woke up and I was like, okay, I need to go to the emergency. And so they did an ultrasound and there was a ruptured ovarian cyst. I went to my doctor. It was like really not taken seriously. I had so many questions. I'm like, how did this happen? Like, what, there's something that is literally growing on my ovary, and I have no idea how this happened.
Mm.
And I didn't have answers. You should have this surgery 6 months from now and take these painkillers, and this is how we're going to manage it. And those were my two options. And while I'm now studying holistic nutrition, I'm learning so much more about how food is medicine and
Mhm.
making these changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when you're faced with these two alternatives, or like this, surgery and the medication, or doing it myself, I think a lot of people also would prefer to try and do it themselves before they have to face surgery. Not
Yeah.
everyone. Some people also, it's like, just, do it, get it done, it's fine. But for those who have to kind of want an alternative route, and when I say a alternative route, not everyone has a cyst and a burst rupture that's happening in their cervix, but what what can we look at when we're thinking about, okay, we're going to take an alternative approach to balancing our hormones so something like that doesn't happen, or so we don't get these massive red flags where we're just feeling debilitated and we can't move?
It's really your body is speaking to you via these symptoms, right? So when you're going through your day, like when you want to look at like how are you feeling when you wake up in the morning? What are your cravings like during the day? Do you have an energy dip around 3 p.m.? Are you irritable? Are you moody? Like what's coming up for you emotionally? Like how is your period that week before your period? Again, like these are all of the messages that your body is giving to you to start looking at, okay, well, I can make changes here before things get to a place of red flag alert. And these little things are minor red flags, right? We don't take them seriously because we normalize it. Understanding that, like, if you're not feeling the way that you want to feel, like in your, if you could have the most ideal version of yourself and what that looks like, but you're not there, something is missing. And there's so many steps that you can take to that, right? And very simple things like let's look at what you're having for breakfast. Let's look at how you're eating throughout the day. Like, are you eating a lot of processed foods? Are you relying on coffee and sugar and stimulants for your sources of fuel and energy? Because that's going to be very taxing on your adrenal glands, which play a huge role in your menstrual cycle, for example. And I think the one thing to hear for us to definitely just like know as a hard truth is that we as women, our hormones control everything. So any little like disruption or fluctuation is going to throw them off balance. But the more that we can live and build out a life that supports hormonal balance, the more resiliency you have. So when things go off course in your life, because of course stresses are going to happen, you might have to move, like any big thing that's happening. So the more hormonal resiliency and balance you have, the better you are to be dealing with those things and showing up to those things in a way where it's not taxing and it's not burning you out.
And you mentioned it, there's so many things. And I think a lot of people, myself included, get into the state of overwhelm, especially, also when I'm working with clients, it's just like, okay, where can we start? There are so many things to start on.
Yeah.
So before we go there, you mentioned something really nice just before we started going into what we can do. This monthly shedding that we're going through, this hormonal tension that builds up, the feelings that we feel, and then we shed, and then, the spring and summer part of our month comes and we feel great again. And then we have to go through this whole entire cycle. Let's just walk through that a bit because, I feel like for everyone who menstruates, we know that we have these different phases.
Yeah.
Some are better, some are worse. And I think we want to try and make them as good as possible. And I think we can eat all the right things and do all the movement. And I want to get into that as well. But can you just walk me through this shedding that happens emotionally and physically that's perhaps renewing us? And what can we dive into there and unpack to try and make it a smooth transition?
Yeah, and I think this is a huge part of holistic healing and really looking at whole human health because, in my approach, if there's an imbalance physically, sure, we know what to do for the physical body, right? Whether it's more movement, aligning with your cycle, and like eating better, for example. But then there's just the emotional, the mental, and spiritual aspects that you're never going to really have those conversations maybe in your primary practitioner's office, right? And it's really understanding that those are real parts of yourself and they also need nourishment on a deep level. And so I think it should never be overlooked how we're feeling, right? We are meant to be living these joyful lives, and no doubt, like, it's a really hard time on planet Earth, just in general, and post COVID, all the things on top of your just like life. But I do think that there's a spiritual side to us that needs to be nourished. I do think that when those emotions come up that week before, there's also messaging and healing there for everybody. And a huge part of my personal healing that happened later after I, did all the nutrition things and the supplements was really working with somebody that was like a somatic therapist, like a breathwork practitioner, a somatic healing practitioner. And that was to go deeper into where in my life is my childhood and my inner child, let's say emotional traumas from childhood are still running the show in my current life. And where am I reacting from that perspective and taking a hard look at that? Because these are just subtle energies that might be dictating where there is deeper pains. And so some of that pain, when it's like convenient, right, at this time of the month, just because like our hormones are off and this is just part of what happens, might come up. And it's a part for you to explore through journaling. Like, why are you feeling so emotional? What is it that somebody that cut you off really made you that angry? You know what I mean? Like, there's a source to it, and it's like looking deeper as to what parts of yourself actually need a little bit more nourishment and maybe just space, right? Also, just like we're going so fast, when do we allow ourselves time and space to feel our feelings and process a little bit deeper so that things come up so they can be released?
Oh, I love this. I love this conversation actually, because who says it? I think it was Maisie Hill. She writes period power and also menopause power. And she is like, you know, when you are in the first 2 weeks of your cycle, everything's going great. And you don't have perhaps these feelings that come up because it's kind of masked, right?
Yeah.
All these feelings, all these built up perhaps triggers and angers and things that we've carried through our life surface. And I just loved how you said it's an opportunity to give that space, and it's good to
Yeah.
be able to go through therapy to do that. And we kind of just try to block it down, but knowing that it's always there and using that time of your cycle to kind of address it, I just think that's such an important part, and I feel like no one is talking about that.
Yeah. And I kind of got into this too. I mean, one for my own personal healing, but yeah, I think too, with just making those initial changes, this mindset piece is so important before we even, because sometimes if your mindset isn't in the right place, you might be having some of these traumas come up that are self-sabotaging, that you don't make the changes.
Mm.
They aren't sustainable and they're not lasting, right? So women that I'll give you an example, a client that I worked with, she ended up being a caretaker to her younger siblings at a very young age. So she was put into like, a parentified sort of role very early on. And when it came, and her health was like, she had PCOS, she had a lot of things that she wanted to address and all those symptoms. But when it came time to make changes, she was, still in such a people pleasing. I have to still make dinner for my siblings. I have to run all these everybody was coming before her, that her mindset set shift was so difficult.
Mm.
And that's why sometimes that is such an important starting place.
Yeah, it's really the inside out type of work.
Yeah.
Such an important piece. So when we look at society, modern life, what would you say are perhaps the biggest things that are impacting our hormonal regulations or dysregulation?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much information, and I think it's great that we're having these conversations more, and I see more and more practitioners like myself and yourself online. When I think about women that are waking up anxious, running on coffee or grabbing something like sweet, like a muffin or a Kellogg's protein bar for breakfast, and then, rushing to work and like not prioritizing what they really need and being stressed out and like living in this sort of day to day. And it's really like the way of life. And it's really giving us taking a step back to be like, okay, how am I feeling? And if I'm not feeling good, like I have no energy, I'm irritable, I have terrible periods, or, whatever the symptoms are. I have PCOS, I have endometriosis, I have, whatever
Yeah.
the condition is. But I think burnout and just feeling exhausted and going through your life exhausted, like we're not meant to do that. We're meant to have these like vibrant, abundant levels of energy, right? Like women as creators, like we have that. And it really needs to be nourished. And it's really taking a reclamation and a huge stance in giving yourself permission to
Mm.
make the changes and prioritize yourself.
That's really hard. That's
It's
really
very hard.
hard.
There are things that I do that maybe friends have seen me do over time that they wouldn't have done. Like every Sunday, I meal prep, but that
Mm.
makes sure that gives me so much control in terms of what I'm eating for lunch. And I can take it to work or wherever I'm going. And I know that I'm eating in a way that's balancing my hormones. And that's something I have control over, right? If you have to do your prep the night before, does that mean one night or 2 nights of the week you're saying no to like after work drinks or something like that? Like there will be
Mm.
some slight sacrifices, and it's habit stacking. It's all temporary as well, right? Like the time that we put in, but that time, there's so much realizations in how much space you need just for yourself
Yeah.
when you start doing that. And then over time, it becomes easier to be like, okay, I don't really want to sit through traffic to get to that dinner on a Wednesday night, maybe
Mm.
do that on a Friday or Saturday or whatever. But it is a rebalancing of, and just a shifting of where are you going to like put in place these things that are going to make your life easier and help you feel better.
Yeah. It comes back to that saying, energy goes where energy flows where energy goes. Where are you putting your efforts in, and are you getting the result that you want from where you're putting your energy?
Yeah. And sometimes it's simple things like scrolling, right? Scrolling late at
Mm.
night, but just that blue light really affects our hormones, our melatonin production. It's spiking our cortisol.
Yeah.
And sleep is so important. Like women need more sleep than men. One, for ovulation. Um, fertility, whatever your goals are, but even just hormonal balance, right? So these are little things. But, I was working with a therapist earlier this year that I love. And, he was even, one of his examples is like, sometimes we just have to tell our brain and ask your brain, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to pick up my phone and just scroll here for 20 minutes?
This is again, I feel like this also ties in with the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also highly about re-narrating what you're telling yourself. But it's, yeah, like I just feel like there's so many things that can impact hormonal health. And, you touched on a lot of different aspects, whether it's your phone and your sleep or what we're eating. And I think to actually, you hit it really nicely on the head, to actually make the change, you have to make sacrifices, and it's temporary. I love that. I think that, and it's temporary, is one of the most important things, because sometimes when you're making changes, it feels like this is going to be forever and I hate this. It's not normal. It's really, really difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think you could say that with anything, right? Starting something new, whether it's an activity or like, even at one point, like just going to the gym or, getting to the habit. But once you start like doing that for like, I would say 6 months, and time goes by pretty quickly, the way you start feeling, it's like you don't want to go back to your before.
Yeah.
Right? It just like you can realize how important that becomes.
Yeah. When it comes to women's hormonal health, everyone, I feel like, as you said, eat this much protein and we all need to sleep and we all got to start meditating. Like, we know that we need to do these things. And again, like, I am completely guilty of this because I know that I should be doing all these things. I do try to implement these things.
Right.
But when our cycle comes around, again, there's some times in the month where I don't want to do it. And I think consistency is a massive thing. So, what can women do to get the most bang for their buck to balance their hormones? And let's start. What does balancing hormones mean when we talk about that?
So, our hormones are messengers. They're really just a network of communicators that are happening and running behind the scenes and running everything. Really, what you want to be focusing on is nourishing the organ systems that are responsible for hormone production. So I would say what makes it very simple is focus on your gut health, right? Most of your estrogen is produced in your gut, and we are what we absorb, not necessarily what we eat. Focus on eating like a diverse, just colorful, lots of plants, getting in your protein. I know everybody knows there's information around that, but also focusing on your liver, right? The liver is a master battery pack of our entire body, but it's also responsible for detoxifying all of these environmental and chemical that were exposed, like cosmetic products, but also responsible for eliminating excess estrogen, which helps you have a better a period. But I think just to keep it simple, like the liver likes bitter foods, right? So just like some arugula, like bitter melon, or some digestive herbs that you can take. And these are really simple things that you can do, and eating in a way that balances out your blood sugar. I think that if there's anything that anyone can do, is just always eating in a way. It can be as simple as that.
Yeah, that's really nice. And because we're eating every day anyway, like
Right.
this is the trick. It's like you just need to fine tune what you're already doing. And I
Yeah.
think what you said then is really good. So yes, like gut and liver, these are two massive organs that we need to be, I guess, supporting. What about our adrenal health? Because when you said organs, I'm like, that's beautiful. Like, I'm like, yes, we need to support our gut, thyroid, and our liver. And then I was thinking, okay, adrenal health, and what about our thyroid? How can we support each one of these organs as well?
Yep. And I think again, like just eating in this way where you're having enough protein, you've got enough fats, you're helping your body feel safe enough to produce hormones. So when we're too stressed, our body's actually just going to shut down reproduction, which shuts down ovulation. And the main event of our cycle is so that we ovulate. And when we ovulate, we get the benefits of progesterone, which is our calming hormone. So when you talk about adrenal health, again, it's like really managing our stressors in life. And that's where some of these practices, like whether it's breath work or meditation, and meditation, I know I hear a lot of people say it's difficult. It can be a 20-second breath, like something, actually, it's a 60-second breath. And it's like an inhale for 20 seconds, hold for 20 seconds, like sort of at the third eye point, and then release for 20 seconds. And if you can't do it in 20 seconds, start with 5 seconds. That really helps to regulate your nervous system and a stress response. And it's that mental, that sort of mental shift of like, how am I going through my day responding versus reacting? And how much more control, and that might take a little bit of time. But all of those things together really help to combat how much cortisol and wear and tear that we are putting on our adrenals, right? Because they do play a huge role in our menstrual cycle as well. But it's also just managing how we're reacting to high stressors on a day-to-day basis. So the more that you can maintain these sort of routines, it's really helping your body reduce that wear and tear on your adrenals, right? And then our thyroid, again, is our energy management system, really responsible for our metabolism and our energy. So again, reducing your stress will help with that, but making sure your body is really nourished. And everything works in connection, nothing is separate. So if you start working on your gut health, you start supporting your liver, everything also is getting a sort of rippling effect.
I love that. I often used to say as well, it's like when like we say hormone imbalance, it's like when one hormone's out, they're all out. That's the thing. And it's not just our sex binding hormones, it's not just our sex hormones, I should say, the estrogen and progesterone. We need to think about, as you said before, the circadian rhythm, melatonin. We need to think about cortisol. It all really comes in. You're right. In a fast-paced world, it's just this massive disconnect that we have. I think finding our way back to that, you mentioned meditation, you mentioned breath work. I think this is also such an important aspect as well. When women need to start focusing on this.
It's so interesting too, because slowing down is so much better for a woman's body. And again, we are living in a world where it's like based on the premise that women are just small men, right? That that we can thrive in the same way, and men have a completely different response to stress than women do. It's completely different, But I would say that as soon as you have a cycle, girls are having their cycles earlier. And sometimes I talk to women that are parents and they're like, my daughter is complaining how her period is so painful in it. And sometimes it gets dismissed, but I'm like, you should believe her. And it can turn into PCOS, it could turn into endometriosis, it could turn into fibroids, it could turn into a cyst, right? There's definitely other gynecological issues. So I think parents getting involved and getting informed, because if your child is in a lot of pain, or if somebody is having a lot of pain every month, that's, we really have to control that inflammation, that inflammatory response that's happening, and really educating yourself. So I think as soon as a woman has a cycle, because, we'll be going from menstruating years to perimenopause to menopause, and each cycle, how you can support yourself is going to support that next cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I love that you touched on that as well, because this is the thing. It's like, if we're already having hormonal imbalances and we're having period problems or irregularities or whatever it is, this is transitioning in to perimenopause and then eventually menopause. And these are all stages that we have to go through. We don't get to choose to go through them or not. We have to go through them. And the way in which our hormones are balanced are going to reflect the ease or the complication.
Exactly. And then also our ability to preserve ovarian function and longevity, right? Yeah. Not necessarily, fertility may not be on everybody's mind, but if that's something that you want to have, like the better condition or the better that you can support your body, no matter what choices you're making, can help increase your chances of pregnancy if at some point that you want that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it all starts, right? A good functioning menstrual cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to say women have it tough, because but we don't. I really want to circle back to what you said at the start of the message, using your your body as a sign for what is it telling you, and also using your menstrual cycle as a way to kind of be aware of how you're feeling. I think this is so important. I feel like every month we've got a new, every cycle, it's almost like we have a new opportunity to start and feel renewed.
Yeah, it's actually a really special thing that we kind of get.
Yeah. And it's not talked about enough. And as you said, like, we're treated like little men that have to kind of hustle and, stand up in a male's world and try and compete for equal pay, equality in general. And I think stepping back into the feminine, it's a beautiful thing.
Exactly. I was just going to say it's very empowering, and also realizing there's a lot of power in that space.
Yeah. What's one thing that you could perhaps, and I hate saying one thing because I know that's not about one thing, but now is the time that I can start feeling empowered, taking control of how my health is, how my hormonal health is. I'm ready to take the first step in the direction of looking after myself in this way. What would you suggest that they could do?
I think, again, controlling what you're eating and looking at food as really like every an opportunity that you're putting medicine in your body and that you can like be so creative with it, right? Like nature gives us all this abundance, like in terms of spices and herbs and um like the amount of fruits and vegetables that like get produced. You can do so many interesting things where it's like it's never has to be boring, right? Like
Mm.
it can be such a creative process and using that to nourish yourself deeply, right? Like get in your good quality fats, your good protein, right? And your carbs because you have to eat every day, right? So that's an opportunity really to nourish yourself every single meal. And it's, you can create a sort of ritual or something special about that, but like every time you're eating something to know that it's benefiting you and it's actually really good for you on a deeper cellular level. I think get creative and fun at the grocery store and in the kitchen, right? Like it doesn't have to be a boring process.
Mm.
Um, I think movement is so important. We do live like really sedentary lifestyles, and I think if you don't like going to the gym, there's so many different activities that you can do. It could be dancing, it could be tennis, like whatever. Learn a new and look at it as an opportunity to learn a new skill. Even at the gym or working with investing in a personal trainer. Don't ever. I think this is a top one. Is like don't be scared to invest in yourself. Right. I invested a
Invest in
lot
your
with
health. Mm.
yeah, with naturopathic doctors, in acupuncture, in chiro, all these other modalities that are available to you have so much benefits, which I have benefited from hugely. But the one thing about going to the gym is like, as you get older, challenging your body to do hard things, there's a confidence that comes in that, right? And there's also a confidence in a mental aspect of like just doing hard things or challenging yourself. So I think that's like with activity, make it fun, make it that you're challenged and that you're growing and you're having a skill, but something that you enjoy to do as well, right? And that's the other thing too. We need more joy in our lives, like finding the joy in these processes, right? So whatever it is, like whether it's community, getting together with friends, like making sure you're laughing more often, or something that you really enjoy. I think that's a big part of this puzzle. Our body, like we live here, but our minds, we also live up here. So this can be a warfield or a garden, and taking different steps to learn about your own inner landscape and your mental talk and your mental chatter provides so much healing. So those are some places to start. And I know meditation it almost sounds like too easy when we say it because everybody talks about it, but really taking and giving yourself like 5 minutes of just like intentional focusing on your breathing, being present with yourself. When I meditate in the morning, it's like I get my mind right before the world does it for me, and that
It's
building
beautiful.
that mental fortitude. um I'd say those are like the 3, 4 things that like I would start with.
That's so true. And it's the same with your health and with your hormones. It's being intentional about how you want to live and what you want your health to be like. Because if you are not intentional with that, and if you have issues and you're not correcting them or kind of trying to rectify them, then you just end up kind of being the result of not correcting them, or allowing yourself to also just be a part of the medical system, which is perhaps not looking at you as the individual and caring necessarily about your hormonal health and your hormonal balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about this too, like, when we're recognizing that we're in a state of like exhaustion and all the symptoms that we know that you could be presenting, like let's say there's acne, weight gain, like all of the things that make you unhappy. These are quality of life issues. And
Mm.
this is your life and your day to day, right? It has to start somewhere. And, hopefully it's not like for me, when I had a health scare, and just to add to that story, when I had that surgery, they went in and found stage 1 endometriosis, which I didn't know I had, and was also contributing to a lot of the pain that I was in. But yeah, like ultimately, you just deserve to have like more energy and a vibrant life because that's how you're going to show up to your job, your relationships,
Mm-hmm.
your day to day, right? And that is making up the days of your life. So I think that's sort of like the bigger picture aspect of taking these steps to healing.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's actually how you end up making small impact on the world as well, right? So
Yeah.
your quality of life improves and you improve everything around you. And then there's a ripple effect that kind of comes on from that. And that's a really powerful and really beautiful thing. And to know that by correcting your hormones, by having a functioning menstrual cycle, coming into either fertility, pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, like knowing that we have the control or the power to look
Yeah.
after that. I find that it's an amazing gift. It's a beautiful gift that I think every woman needs to really take on and intentionally take control of as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Neetu, it's been so nice chatting with you. Also, like chatting about the aspects that we don't often talk about when it comes to hormonal health and improving our hormones to have a better quality of life from an internal aspect. Where can they find you?
So the best place to find me is on Instagram. My handle is wake_up wellness. Um, my website is going through a facelift and a rebrand right now. So I'm going to have some of my programs on there. You can find my link tree. And if you just have any questions, you can just DM me and I'm happy to chat.
Neetu, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having this conversation. I think more conversations like this are needed.
Needed.
So, yeah, I'm glad you're doing also what you're doing. And yeah, just taking the time to like really hone in on women's health and it just helping to improve quality of life overall.
We're doing it together.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here. You could have been listening to anything, but you're here interested in reclaiming your health. I hope you found the episode useful and constructive. If you enjoyed it and would like to show support for the show, please leave a review, as this makes my content more discoverable for other people to enjoy and learn from. Please also consider subscribing to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy listening. Finally, the best way to show support for the show is by sharing it with someone who you think might benefit from it. Thanks for listening, be well, and I'll catch you next time.